Normally when you go to an investment advisor, there are 3 or 4, sort of standard approaches he gives you. He'll say, set your financial goals. Easier said than done, because, from where we come from, a lot of us even don't know how to go around setting our financial goals. And then he will say, start early, right? And very often, and I think we were again having a conversation before this, saying that most people who come in actually come in after the age of 35. So, again, easier said than done. And then we say small amounts of money month after month, the SIP example, which you're trying to say. But you also say that there are a lot of people who see a new high and then they take out some money. So, how consistent can that SIP be? And then we say stay invested for the long haul. And most people don't even know what the long haul is, because for many people, long haul is tomorrow morning. Rather than, 20 years from now. So, how do you, these are real life problems, and, you've been there, seen it, advised millions of, people, both young and old. So how do you actually navigate these 3-4, basic truisms, if I may say, in building up wealth?
Yeah, even the regulators say that you have to do the risk assessment.
Right.
And, there is some framework suggested or something like that. But I think, in the last 20, 25 years or 30 years of meeting plenty of investors, reading their questions, applying our mind to it, even applying our mind, coming with a suggestion and then realizing that it could have been perfected better, or, thinking harder about it subsequently. We have arrived at, 2 things, which is 2-3 things, which is the most important thing. And this is something which only an investor himself can decide. One is, of course, you have to start early. Of course, you have, even before starting early, you have to save. Most people today, the biggest challenge is not about where to invest your money, but, do you save at all to actually invest your money? Because today we are living in a world where you get your first salary and somebody is standing by to enable you to spend your future income over the next 5 years, today itself. So you start with a negative investment to begin with, and that will be a consumption, whether you are buying an iPhone or something. So that, I think, is the first challenge. Second is that telling somebody to try it out, start investing anyhow. Once you start you think that you are saving. Then the problem is that, there you'll be inspired by your friend who will be doing something very magical. That, okay, he is coming and actually boasting about he doubled his money day before, or, and you falling for it. And, and you don't really, these kind of initiatives are not done with that probity, or, that kind of initiative that you will go and find that SEBI report which say that 92% of the investors indulging in this kind of nonsense are losing money. And even if you are in an age where you think that, okay, these idiots will lose money, but I'm going to be the 8%. Right. So, you start with that. And I think it is all a journey. That is how you learn. That is how you learn by, how to ride a bicycle, or, in the markets. And it is better that you learn faster, learn quickly, fail faster. Because if you do it, you will realize what really works. And this is when, mutual funds come in. And that, initial years you can't save. Then once you start saving, then you do all this trading or try and do some magic. And then, many people are also, are in the second generation. People are not as poor or as marginal as the previous generation, where somebody was earning to remit some money back home. Right. So, the general prosperity is also a little different from what, in 1 or 2 generations. So I think people should go through this whole phase. In the financial affairs, I have figured that you don't learn from other people's mistake. You have to lose your own money. Till you lose your own money, it does not register in your mind. Okay. And so one should lose fast and quickly.
So I think 2 things I hear you saying. One is experiential learning. Yeah. In your own financial management, your personal financial management. And the second thing I hear you saying is you need to convert people from saving to investing in a structured way.
In a structured way. And the third,
how do you make that move from saving to investment to investing in a structured way?
There I have, very clear forward. Everything that we ask, that will you lose money? If you lose this much money, how scared will you start crying, or will you feel happy, and all that, those things don't work. What really works is how critical that money is and what is the time you have. because that criticality of that money, if that, we have broadly two kind of goals: negotiable, non-negotiable.
Okay.
My child gets into school on 1st of June 2025. That is the day, and I need to have that money handy. I plan to buy a home in next 3 to 5 years. If something, if it happens in 5 years, it's fine. If I get lucky with the market, I can buy it tomorrow. That's nicer. So negotiability of this. So negotiable, and how critical that money is. That criticality of money is in relation to your income. I have experienced all these early in my career. I invested all that money in equity. And then I realized that, that was something, if that scale of money is 10x your annual savings, right, it's very critical. Right. If it is half of your annual savings, you will look at it very differently. That was your annual bonus which you have invested.
Right.
So scale of money, criticality of that, and then, your income scale, because, I think broadly people are into 3, 4, 5, income strata, which makes their life very different, which is a function of, how much surplus, overall financial, your net worth. Because if in all I have invested, been able to save about 18 lakh rupees, my whole world depends on that. 20% plus minus actually makes a hell of a difference. Right. It can actually mean my child goes to college or not.
Right.
It can mean, I'm able to live in my own house or not. So, because 20% of that 15, 18, 20 lakh rupees could be 2, 4 lakh rupees.
Right.
Because I have seen that, somebody able to buy a scooty for his son makes hell of a difference to their life at a certain stage of life. Whereas for somebody, it could be, a swing in the market of a certain scale, which may not be that material, or it may not impact him, or sometimes he may not even notice it. So this is real risk tolerance, your time frame, criticality of that money, and your own net worth. Because in relation to your net worth, because what is going to affect our life will be material. What is not going to affect our life at some level can also, reconciliation becomes easy. Right. You are not going to be deprived of something real. Right. So that I think is very important. And these are the only things which works in my risk assessment and framework of advice. And it has to be, and the guidance is entirely by changing the allocation and the preferences.
Yeah. So let me just come into a specific question. So say you had a 24-year-old individual investor. What would you suggest would be an ideal asset allocation? I mean, I know you will tell me that, I need more information. I need to know how much surplus and all that. I mean, because,
I don't need more information.
Typically people would say, I mean, if you're young, it must be equity. And that's very often what I hear investment advisors saying. If you're young, it must be equity. Why do you need to think beyond that? But what would you suggest? How would you suggest she looks at, putting aside money for building long-term wealth for herself?
I would not like to give any complex structure or even a lecture.
Right.
I would just persuade him that start investing today.
Right.
Before getting out of my room, get started.
Right.
And these are a bunch of good funds. Choose anyone which you like, if any.
Okay.
Don't think of anything.
No, not equity, nothing.
No, broadly equity.
Okay.
Ideally, I would like that. If I have a 45-year-old person walking in and investing for the first time, I will suggest him an aggressive hybrid fund.
Right.
But for this 25-year-old person or 24-year-old person,
right,
invest anything and do SIP.
Right.
And also do some lump sum in between.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
I think, it doesn't matter because you have to really learn the magic of compounding.
Right.
In some period of time.
Right.
And you have to experience it.
Right.
Once you experience it, because, the premium for choosing the best fund or the not so good fund, the premium for choosing an inappropriate fund like a sectoral fund or a thematic fund or a diversified fund.
I'll come to that a little later. Yeah.
Yeah, there are issues. Right. I'm saying that, but if a person has been tempted and provoked to invest and get experience of investing, I think falling into habit is one of the biggest challenges. And falling into habit, you can fall into habit only if you derive the pleasure out of it. So my first attempt with any person will be very educative in terms of get him initiated in the way he feels happy about, and make sure that he has given a 12-month to 36-month mandate so that he can witness the magic.
So Dhirendra, from what you were saying, I think for an individual first-time investor, whether it is passive or whether it is an actively managed fund, whether it is a thematic fund or it is a diversified fund, whether it is SIP or whether it is lump sum, is not so very important.
Yeah, getting started
is most important.
Is the most
Once
important.
you've got started,
yep.
there are certain choices that you need to make. So very clearly, SIP seems to be a better option than lump sum. But if you do have money coming in, then lump sum is okay. But what about passive versus active, or directly or through an advisor? I mean, how would you, or a diversified fund against a sectoral fund once you become, a reasonably seasoned, mutual fund investor?
Direct versus regular is very simple. Whether you want to have an advisor or you want to invest through an intermediary.
Right.
And if you invest through an intermediary who is holding your hand in the transaction bit, I think their role is coming down. So consider, looking for an advisor and invest in a direct plan. That is the best vehicle. If that does not happen, then look for a mutual fund agent, because they are not available in large number. They may not be available in the neighborhood. And I think those advisors have they add a great value today, because the biggest thing that everybody gives you a financial plan or the appropriate, then the rebalancing advice, help you with the transaction. What really happens is that once in a while, the advisor has to behave as a psychiatrist. And he has to behave as a psychiatrist, and that is the most important moment in the life of the investor, and that is the most important role that he plays. And those moments are two. A moment like now, where everybody thinks that he has to invest right away because they are missing the bus. And fear of missing out and investing somehow wherever, and possibly picking the riskiest thing because that is yielding the most. And the risk is not visible as and when till it actually visits you. And, as it is said that, and that experience could be damning, can be devastating for many people, because markets go on a staircase and come in the elevator. So, and that is not going to change. That is the character of it, and that is how it will be. So that is one.
If I may interrupt out here, are investment advisors today equipped to play that role of a psychiatrist?
They are, but they are very few. Okay. There will be some in Delhi and Mumbai and Bangalore and Pune and
so we need
to
increase that community.
We need them in large number, and till they actually have experienced at least one full market cycle, till somebody has not experienced 2008, he will also be, he will just be fanning the greed and fear of the investor, which exactly, and he's supposed to do the opposite of that. Then the second occasion when he has to really play the role of a psychiatrist is when you think that it is all over. Right. And, when you look at October of 2008, when everybody thinks that, okay, it is all over, you invested your money in the small cap fund, you invested your 100 rupee, and now you are left with only 35 rupees. Right. And you think that you can't take it anymore. And that is when you need this guy, because they are useful on these two occasions. Right. And help you moderate and help you not go crazy on two extremes. Right. And otherwise, you can just carry on. And unfortunately, the most recent crop of investors, and in large number that they have come, they haven't experienced any of these two things. One saving grace is that anyway they are SIP investors. The SIP book that has grown is of a kind where investors will not be disappointed simply because they have experienced it. They have seen how gradual investment, because everybody has a capital. Because, we are missing out on one aspect of SIP, which has gone unnoticed. People were not doing recurring deposit in the quantum they are doing SIP.
Right. That's an interesting observation.
And the advantage of doing this recurring deposit or SIP is that from a regular cash flow, to be able to build a capital is something which Indian investors have not experienced, even though they were a saver. Right. They were actually letting their savings accumulate in their bank account. Right. And that was a gentleman's way of looking at it, savings or investment or, whatever it was. Now, compounding at a higher rate, and a sum of money which was not there in the first place. Right. When you look at, you have 5 lakh rupees, which you thought that, you will never have, and it's all started with a 5,000 rupee. Right. Is quite magical. You start believing in it. sometimes you misbehave. You spend it on things, which could be impulsive or which may be not justified, but it is all fine. That is what you have money for. You don't have to be right all the time. If you have time on your side, but this is the beginning. And I think it is very important that people start somehow and do it for 2-3 years, and rest of the things get sorted anyway.
But what about passive versus active, if I may ask you?
I'm an active guy. I still believe that there are people who will be able to beat the index by a modest margin or a very high margin over a long period of time. And if I'm going to invest for the long run, I feel that in India, because the Indian market is very broad and it is not very deep, and there is not much value to be added, and the good indices are only in the large cap universe. In fact, you don't have credible index, the small cap index. Okay. You don't have credible micro cap index. I don't know how scalable they are.
Right.
Some of them will actually be dysfunctional if somebody gets 5,000 crore to be invested in a micro cap fund of 250 stocks.
Right.
Because in a country where promoters still own nearly 50% of the stocks, of the outstanding shares in any company, it's very difficult. Then comes, so I would say that don't wait your experience or your habit to be held by this dilemma. Start anyhow.
Right.
In fact, the value, assuming that you will earn 20% more than the index, it is better to earn the index return than actually put your money in the recurring deposit or not. There is a penalty for not starting today,
right?
Not allocating. So don't get into this debate. Even if you are debating this, get started. Not a good fund, maybe a aggressive hybrid fund. Even if it matches index return, that will still be a steadier take on the downside. Everybody is not.
So if you say that active funds do make some sense, you've got some, thematic funds that are being launched. You have sectoral funds that are being launched. There are diversified funds that are being launched. How do you then decide as to which suits me best?
No, they can be avoided very safely, and you will not miss out on anything if you are avoiding all the sectoral funds. Mm-hmm. And in fact, not only that, I can tell you with full confidence that last 20 years we have seen the launch of sectoral funds or thematic funds. In the last 25-30 years, I don't think there is any new sector which is, making a comeback. In fact, the current rush for sector funds or thematic funds is entirely because of a technical reason. SEBI has said that you can't launch another large cap fund anymore. You can't launch this fund. So, if people have exhausted their quota of their fund launches, so they are asking some index makers to go and manufacture an index so that they can launch a fund. And investors are still, guided by some of those naive, not so intelligent understanding that they're buying a new fund cheap at 10 rupee. Also, in good times, it is much easier to sell a story. And everybody thinks that a story, if it is credible, and investors' favorite pastime is chasing recent past performance.
Right.
So you can weave a story around something and it will sell. And we should not forget that mutual funds are primarily dependent on raising as much money than managing it very well. Mm-hmm. Their substantial revenue depends on raising money and keeping it. That's a very
interesting take. Yeah.
So, and after that, if it does okay, they are fine. If it is not very disappointing, they are still okay, because they will make good part of their money. All that will, but if the fund does very well, then they stand to benefit. Investors also stand to benefit because they get a small part of their assets under management. No. So, I think investors should be extremely careful, and you will not. Last 20 years, I was referring that, there was a PSU fund launched in 1990s, right. Mid-90s. Right. Or you look at the MNC fund, or you look at every time there has been the flurry of activity around sector funds and thematic funds, it has been a warning bell. It has been a short-term or a medium-term warning bell. Whether it was in, technology fund, infrastructure fund, or anything in the past.